Hello, everyone. One last question was asked this semester regarding how to integrate whatever we do in the 3D environment into motion graphics environment. That is to move items from within 3ds Max or Maya or Cinema 4D into an environment like After Effects or even Photoshop for compositing purposes. So I thought I'd put together this short video to showcase that workflow. With the current version of After Effects, there is a free plugin, an extension that you can find at the Adobe website. And that extension is called Adobe After Effects Live Link. Now, I am currently, as you see, in Maya. And in Maya, you'll find that extension. It's a default extension, and it comes with the program. Once you install it, you will find it under File, Adobe After Effects Live Link. So what you would do is you would open up that extension in Maya by clicking on it, and it opens up this window. And then you will go to After Effects. And then in After Effects, once you install the extension, you will find it under Window, Extensions, Autodesk Maya Live Link. Now you'll notice that this opens up a new panel, and this panel, as long as you see a green light here, that little green dot, that means that it's connected to whatever session of Maya you have open. So now this is connected to that project in After Effects. Now they're not really connected until you actually start sending items from Maya into After Effects. At that point, it will create a composition for you in After Effects that will match the settings of whatever you have in here in Maya. So if I go to my export settings in Maya, you'll notice that I have a composition that is 24 FPS and that is 960 by 540. Those are the settings that I have for this composition. I know it's 24 FPS because that's what I'm working on my timeline. Now, what I have here in my scene, if I scroll my video, I have about 120 frames of a very simple scene. It's basically a cube or a box. I also have a camera, and that's what we're looking at the world through right now. Let me actually go to my 4View, and you'll see up here in my top viewport that I do have a camera, and the camera is basically following a path. So I have attached it to a circular path, and it's just rotating around my subject, around the box. So when I scrub the video, you'll notice that the camera is just following that path. And I also have a locator, as you can see right here in the center. I created a locator, and remember, you create locators by going into Create Locator. Now, these locators you can name if you want to. So for example, if I were to rename this here as, let's say, particles, that would be what it would be sent, the name that it would give to the null object that this will create in the After Effects environment. So locators become null objects, 3D null objects in the After Effects composition. Things that you can send from Maya to After Effects include cameras, locators, and lights. The geometry is not recognized yet. For a workflow that recognizes geometry inside After Effects, you would need to work with something like Cinema 4D, which is integrated into the After Effects environment, or you would need to create objects, OBJs, that you will import either via Cinema 4D, the Cinema 4D extension in After Effects, or something like Element 3D or something like that, a plugin that they sell for After Effects. Element 3D is something that you find at the videocopilot.net website, and it's a really, really good plugin to have. So with that said, let me go ahead and just simply middle mouse drag my particles into the AE Live Link box, and I'm going to middle mouse drag one of my lights just to have it on the other side, and I'm going to middle mouse drag my camera. So those are the three items that I have placed inside, middle mouse dragged those into the AI Live Link. And then when I go to After Effects, you'll notice that I have now a composition that has been created for me. and it contains those three items: the camera, the spotlight, and the null object called particles. Now, if I notice, I am now have a composition called export to ae.ma, and it's in my project window. And if I select it and look at its settings, you'll notice that it's 960 by 540 at 24 FPS. So this works beautifully. Now let me click OK on that. What I'm going to do next is, I already did this, by the way. I'm going to go back to Maya. I exported every single one of these frames as a TIFF. And the export setting is TIFF. Let me actually go to the export settings. I exported it as a TIFF with no compression. I exported by name, extension, name, number, and extension, and basically just 120 frames. That's all I did, and I exported whatever camera I had available. So if I go to camera 1, that's what's going to be exported. So with that done, what I done is I went back to After Effects, and I have those files as a TIFF sequence in a folder. So I'm going to import them into my AE file. So if I go into AE, there they are inside my images folder. There's my first one. I'll make sure that I select TIFF sequence, that is clicked. And when I import this, you'll notice that it's going to ask me, hey, you have alpha information with this. How do you want to treat it? In most cases, we will know what it is, so we'll probably just click guess, and it'll select the best option based on the information in the actual image. So I'll click guess, click OK, and there's my TIFF sequence. So if I drag that into my composition, I see my box, and you'll notice that it's shorter than my actual composition. And the reason for that is because this, when I create an image sequence, by default, the program will set it to 30 FPS. So I need to go select that image sequence, right click it, and go to its interpret footage option, click main, and then over here where it says assume frame rate 30, change that to 24 FPS. Click OK, and you'll notice that you can now extend for the full 120 frames that you have rendered from Maya. So with that done, I'm going to reduce the length of my composition, and I'm going to trim it so that I only have the 120 frames. And you'll notice that my camera and my lights are basically following the animation the way they are in the Maya environment. Now, where this comes in handy is that I now can go ahead and create a solid in After Effects, for example, and I can add a filter to it that can use the 3D information from my camera. So I just created a solid, and this solid I named Particles, and the solid is basically the comp size, 960 by 540. And into that solid, I am going to apply a filter. I am going to apply a particular filter in this case. Now, particular is very similar to particle whirl. So if you don't have access to Trapcode filters, just simply use particle whirl and you should have the exact same effect. So I'm going to drop that into my particles layer. And you'll notice that as I scrub my playback head, let's give it a second for it to recognize. There it is. Let me zoom in so we can actually see better. Oops. What I'm going to do, as I scrub, you'll notice that I have a bit of particles showing up in the center somewhere, and that is because my whirl in Maya, it's a lot bigger than it is in the compositing whirl. So things I need to change include the size of my particles. Notice that my particles currently are about 5 points. I am going to make that about 20, and they're going to get a little bit bigger. Then I am going to change the life cycle for them. Instead of 5 seconds, 3 seconds, I'm going to make them 5 seconds so that they stay on a little longer. I am also going to change the type of emitter that I have. So currently everything is being basically shot from a point. I want everything to be sort of in a sphere around my object. And I'm going to increase the size of that sphere from 50 to about 12,000 on X, Y, and Z. So 12,000, 1, 2, 3, 12,000, 1, 2, 3, and then 12,000, 1, 2, 3. And you'll notice that I am going to get basically an orb of particles all around my object. Now let me go back to the very beginning, and you'll notice that they'll just simply start appearing and moving around. That is because by default, this has physics applied to it, and the physics include not only gravity, but they also include in the particle itself a speed at which they are being shot from the point where they're being generated. So in this case, the speed is 100. I need to make sure that two things happen. I'm going to get just particles in space, and then I'm going to stop producing those particles, and then I'm going to freeze them in time. So to do that, I am going to change the amount of particles that are being emitted per second to about, say, 5,000. So I'm going to get a lot of particles on the first shot. Then I am going to increase the speed of these things. Say, actually, let me just scrub really quick and see what I get. That actually is pretty good. So I'm going to just simply going to say no speed, no velocity. So I'm going to say 0 value for velocity. And with that done, let me scrub the video, and you'll notice that my particles keep on increasing per frame, and that's because I am overpopulating this every frame. I am adding pretty much whatever adds up to be 5,000 particles per second. So I just won the first push of particles. So let's say I won, let's say 10,000 particles, and I'm going to set a keyframe for those particles. Then I'm going to go to the next frame, page down on the keyboard to move to the next frame, and I'm going to change the amount of particles to 0. So I only have the 10,000 particles that were created at the first frame. And as you notice, as I rotate, so do the particles. My camera rotates and the particles are following. Let me turn off this light really quick so that we don't see that. Let me scrub the video, and you'll see that the particles are basically rotating around. Now you'll notice that the box seems to be behind them, and actually if I create a quick render of this, it actually fakes it pretty well, but I still want to be able to sort of hide the ones that are behind the box. And to do that, it's not possible to do it exactly with the box, because for that the 3D geometry would have to be part of the filter, and we don't have that ability with the setup that we have today. But remember, we're compositing particles that we create in 2.5D space into a 3D environment. So to fake this, we have the ability to change the amount of particles that we see based on the distance from the camera. And so let me stop this for just a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the beginning and pay attention to one of the particles that needs to be hiding when the box rotates. So I'll start looking at this, and as you can see, it seems like, for example, this particle right here would disappear on the next frame. It would just disappear behind the box, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to keep an eye on that particle, and what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the particle setup. So we're going to get 2 of the particles. So I'm going to select that layer, and I'm going to duplicate it, Control D. And you'll notice that I have under visibility, I have far attenuation and near attenuation. And what that means is I can determine how far or how, let me turn off the original one. And how far I can see with the cameras, I guess what I was trying to say. So if I change that from 20,000 to, let's say, 10,000, I'm only going to see 10,000 pixels distance between my position and the amount of particles that I can see. You'll notice that I removed quite a lot of particles. So if I go to, let's say, 15,000, I should start seeing, basically, I am almost like limiting the amount of visibility that I have. You'll notice that the particle that I had here disappeared. So it's somewhere around that area. If I go to 16,000, most likely it will come back, and there it is. So it's somewhere between 15,000 and 16,000. So I'll just simply say 15,500. Let's see if that makes that particle disappear. It didn't. It didn't. So let's say, I'll say 15,250. And I am eyeballing these numbers, as you can see. So 15,250 is what works for me. So those would be the particles that I would see in front of the box, in front of the geometry. If I play this back, all my particles will appear as if they are somewhere in front of the box. And that's what I want. Okay? So with that done, let me go ahead and go back to the beginning, and reactivate the ones in the back. But now when I reactivate those, these are supposed to be in the back. So what I'll do is I'll utilize that alpha channel information that came. Remember when we imported the sequence, that image sequence had an alpha channel with it. I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to use that alpha channel information for showing only the outer portion of the box. So let me turn off the copy of the particles. Let me turn off the original image sequence, and I only have these two things available: the original particles and the copy of the image sequence. So with that setup, I place the copy of the image sequence above the particles, and then I will activate its track matte. I will activate the track matte in the particles layer, reverse alpha. And what's going to happen is I'm only going to see the particles. You'll see that they disappear where the box is supposed to be. I'm only seeing what's outside. That becomes the background. Since the two sets of particles match each other, when I turn on the ones in the front that have been attenuated, they will seem like they are floating in front and disappearing as they go through the back. And what I'll do now is I'll turn off my original box. And when I play this back, I have particles that basically seem to be going behind. Now you can play with the attenuation to get better settings. I see a lot of particles here in the front that seem to be floating in front of the box. And when they go behind, they don't disappear. So I might need to go to the copy of the particle and reduce the attenuation from 15,000, let's say, to 12,000. Once again, this all depends on what you have set up in your composition. And that looks a little bit better. And so now I have the particles floating what seems to be around my box. Now let me go ahead and activate my motion blur for both of these particles. So I'll select motion blur and the motion blur for the particles. Turn that on. And when I re-render this, it's going to look a little bit more natural. Let's see playback at real speed. And that looks pretty good. I hope you can use this when you're trying to bring in your 3D objects into After Effects.